Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got more Foundation spoilers from the last couple days. So many new cards, so many combos, so many synergies. Let's jump right into it with our first new card, the Sire of Seven Deaths. Cost 7, it's an Eldrazi. It's a 7/7 with 7 keywords. First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, and Lifelink, and Ward Pace. You guessed it, 7 life. So a lot of 7s going on here. Pretty cool design, pretty cool art. How good is it? Well, I think the the way I want to use this that's most exciting is in an Urborg Scavenger kind of deck. Soul Flare maybe in older formats, but we got Urborg Scavengers in standard, which is pretty cool. If you don't know what this does, when it comes into play or attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then it kind of eats basically anything in the graveyard, and it gains all of the abilities of that creature. So if you had this in the graveyard and you played the Scavengers, it would get First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, and Lifelink. I don't think Ward is on there. No, Ward isn't on there, unfortunately, but it would get all 6 of those keywords. And then when you attack, you could exile something else. For example, Zatalpa, which they're also reprinting for us, which is amazing for an Urborg Scavenger deck. So this deck is really getting the pieces it needs if you want to make a cool Urborg Scavenger deck. Giving it Flying, Double Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible are probably actually even more important keywords than the Sires. But both of them, you'd probably play both of them in the same deck. You'd play some mill cards on turn 1, turn 2, that maybe search up for the Urborg Scavengers, like Cash Grab, something like that. And then you play the Scavengers on 3, and then hope to maybe the Desalpa first exile that so it has indestructible, so opponent can't remove it, and then you have a 3/3 attack as a 4/4. Now it's got double strike, vigilance, trample, flying, lifelink, menace, and first strike, and reach, just in case you need that. And then basically you have like this unstoppable threat that just wins the game on its own. That's kind of the idea of the deck. So I think definitely a deck to try out in the new standard. Will it be good? I'm not quite sure, but it certainly has some pieces now that are quite powerful. So that is my Urborg Scavengers combo coming soon to this channel, probably. So that's Sire of the Seven Deaths, new card. And Zatalpa is a reprint. So we've got new cards, we've got reprints. I'll talk about both of those in the coming uh, slides here, but I'm going to go over the new ones, most of the new ones first. So another new one is Alicia, Who Laughs at Fate, which is a 3-mana 2/2 legend human warrior, first strike. When it attacks, you put +1/+1 counter on it, and then this raid ability at the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, return target creature card with mana value less than or equal to its power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So I thought, like, where would this see play? How could we kind of use this card? I think it would be quite good actually in a Delirium shell with things like Patchwork Beastie, which sort of put cards and other creatures into your graveyard to kind of use it to return back to play, or Fear of Missing Out, especially. So if you played Beastie on 1, you milled a creature. Fear of Missing Out on 2, you milled another creature. And then on 3, you attacked with the Fear of Missing Out, for example, or both of them if you had Delirium. And then you played this, and you discarded or milled a creature that had mana value 2 or less, like another Beastie or another Fear of Missing Out or any other 1-drop or 2-drop. You just get that right back into play for free, essentially, which is pretty powerful effect. And then as this kind of scales, you can, if you are able ever to attack with the Alicia itself, its power can be grown every attack. With Fear of Missing Out too, you get an additional attack step with it. So there's a lot of synergy there with those two cards, because then it gets an additional +1/+1 counter on it. You can return bigger things from your graveyard. It could also be interesting with like pump spells, things like that. It does pump itself, so there's that. But if you use pump spells on it, you could return something even bigger. That's a lot of different pieces to kind of get a big creature in the graveyard, then play this, then play a pump spell, and then attack. But something you could think about doing with this. But I think it kind of slots into a Delirium deck, aggressive decks, which are kind of Jund colors typically, anyways. So I am excited to kind of see if that would work as well. Let me know in the comments what you think about Alicia, if there's other uses for this, but I think that's kind of the best one that I could think of in standard anyways. Okay, next up we've got a new Kellen. Everybody loves another new Kellen. This was only 1 mana Kellen, Planar Trailblazer. It's a legendary human fairy scout. It's a 2/1. 2 mana to make it become a human fairy detective, and then when you deal damage to a player, exile top card of your library, you can play it this turn, so you can only play it this turn. I feel like this first ability is a little awkward because if you curve out into it, unless you have like 0 mana spells, which you can in older formats have 0 mana spells, but you play this, turn to you, you use its ability in an attack, you kind of lose the card because you can't really play it because you used all your mana. But, whatever. That's fine. The third ability is quite good though to make it in 3/2 with double strike, because now if you get that going, you get to do the first ability twice to exile 2 cards if you hit them twice. So definitely having a 3/2 first strike double strike is quite powerful. So this card definitely scales as the game goes on. It's kind of fine just as a 1-drop. I don't know. Kind of red decks I don't know if they would even play like a one mana 2/1. There is actually already that legal and standard, and they don't really see much play. It is a legend as well. But this definitely has upside, for sure, in the late game, or kind of just scaling up as you kind of go. If you don't have anything to do with your mana, you can pump it into this. So it could see some play in red decks, maybe, but it's kind of interesting that it's also a fairy, 1 mana fairy, which we have some in blue and black, but this is probably better than any of the other 1-drop fairies. And there are fairy cards in standard, such as the Ego Drain, Spell Stutter. There's some other ones in blue and black specifically. I don't know if you'd want to play red in that deck also just for Kellen, but it is a strong 1-drop for the fairy deck potentially, if that is a thing. And there's some other fairies in Foundations that we're getting as well. I don't know, just an idea. That's kind of how I thought maybe you would use this, because I'm not sure 100% that red decks would actually really want to play this. But if you played this on 1 and then you kind of held up Spell Stutter, you held up you cast Ego Drain on turn 2, this Ego Drain is a really powerful card. Obviously, Thoughtseize is so good. But if you don't have a fairy, it's really bad. So you really want like a 1-drop fairy to play with Ego Drain, and so this could work quite well. So just some ideas. I don't know if there's anything else you guys can think of with Kellen or how to use it, but those are kind of my thoughts. All right, next up we've got a new ley line. For some reason they thought they wanted to print more ley lines because that was such a good idea with the red one. Okay, so it's a 4 mana equipment ley line, and so if it's in your open hand, you can have it on the battlefield, and it gives the creature +1/+1, double strike and trample, and equip for 3. So interesting effect. You can play it. You can have it in play for 0, and then equip it for 3. I don't know. I mean, that seems fine. It's not bad. Double strike, trample, and +1/+1 is a good effect, and you would maybe pay 3 mana for that. The problem is if it's not in your opener, then you have to actually cast 4 for this and 3 to equip. You'd probably never play that. So I don't know, but it is interesting though to think about different uses for it because it is a free equipment. For example, in standard we've got Kemba. So if you did have this in your opener and you played this out on turn 0, essentially, and then you played Kemba on turn 2, it would automatically equip to Kemba, and then you'd have a 4/4 double strike trample for 2 mana. That would be pretty strong. So interesting. And there are other cats coming to standard with Foundations, so sort of a lot of cat theme going on. So maybe that could be a thing. So that's not bad, right? You could also play this on turn 0 and Gleeful Demolition on turn 1 in standard now. So there's that. Just destroy it. Use it to make goblin tokens. I was thinking, what else is can use it? So it does have a mana cost of 4. So Slow Bad. This card has never seen really any play, but it's kind of interesting. If you had this on 0 and Slow Bad on turn 3, and then turn 4, you could sacrifice it for 4 additional mana. So you're basically paying 0 mana to get 4 additional mana and ramp up to like 8 mana on turn 4. Could be interesting to play other artifacts. And then we also got Metalwork Colossus in older formats. Pioneer, this sort of a deck, I think. You can live the dream of having 3 Leyline Axes in your opening hand, and then Metalwork Colossus costs 0. That would be pretty sweet, right? So maybe that would definitely see play in that deck. I would say, because the whole point of that deck is to try to get Metalwork Colossus in play kind of as soon as possible, I believe. So some cool, interesting uses for this. Maybe there's some other ones. Let me know what you think about this one. I'd say it could see some play. It's if you're not using it for like the 0 mana effect of it, it's probably not worth it in the deck. But if you're kind of trying to kind of cheat on mana costs or things like that, I think there could be some potential for this to be pretty strong in some ways. So that is the Leyline Axe. Let's go to the Banner of Kinship, which is a 5-mana artifact. And it says when it enters, choose a creature type. This artifact enters with a fellowship counter on it for each creature you control of the chosen type. So you could choose elves, rabbits, dogs, whatever you want, Phyrexians. Creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each fellowship counter on the artifact. So they're definitely pushing a lot of sort of tribal kinship, whatever you want to call it, in standard and foundations here. There's a lot of different sort of different kinships that are available that they're pushing, like elves, for example. We've got a lot of like rabbits and different things from Bloomborough. There was a ton of different tribes, lizards, birds, squirrels, all those fun tribes. Maybe dogs. This is a new card that they're putting into um, foundations. Release the dogs, which gives you 4 mana for 4 dog tokens. So if you played Release the Dogs on turn 4, then you played this on turn 5, they would all get +4/+4, and that would be 4 of them. That would be 5/5s, and I would swing for 20 damage. So that's kind of a cool curve. Go Release the Dogs into Banner of Kinship. I don't know. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe rabbits, elves. Let me know. What do you think is the best sort of tribe or kinship to play this with in Standard? I guess we kind of have to see what else in Foundations we get, but we're all getting a lot of elf support and sort of goblin support as well. So, yeah, we'll see with that. Definitely a cool card to keep an eye on. Soul Weaver is next. This is a really cool, I think quite powerful card, actually. It's a 3-mana, 4/3 Spirit Spider with Reach. It says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you can reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put the card into your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's kind of like a card draw effect, but you always are going to hit another non-token creature or another creature from your library. So you could use this sort of like as a value engine, just like when another creature you control dies, you kind of replace it by drawing a card essentially, which you guarantee is going to be a creature. But certainly can be a combo engine, I believe, too. This is just what I was thinking off the top of my head with like Goblin Bombardment and a bunch of sort of 0-mana creatures like Shambling Ghast, Ornithopter, creatures that can pay for themselves when they die, or Ornithopter. If you have Soul Weaver out and you just like stack your deck with a bunch of Ornithopters or Shambling Ghasts or other 0-mana creatures or creatures that can pay for themselves when they die, and you have a sacrifice payoff. So say you go turn 2 Bombardment, turn 3 Soul Weaver, then you play Ornithopter, sacrifice Ornithopter to the Bombardment, do 1 damage, search your library, get another Ornithopter, or if you have a Shambling Ghast out on turn 1, Goblin Bombardment, then this on 3, sacrifice the Shambling Ghasts, get a treasure token, find another Shambling Ghast, play it, sacrifice it, so you can just kind of go through your whole deck and find all the other kind of 0-mana creatures. You would have to kind of like design your deck very specifically for this to work. Kind of in that regard, maybe only play 1 Soul Weaver and have ways to search it out, so you don't kind of hit it as you keep going through this. But so that's the idea I had about this card. Let me know in the comments what you kind of think about it. Again, I think it could be fine just as a value engine, or just like turn 1 Land Royals, turn 2 play this. On raid, it's pretty decent. It's like a 3-mana 4/3 reach, which is fine with some good upside for when your other creatures die. Would certainly make kind of combat difficult for your opponent. So I think it can be used for that, but also has some combo potential for sure. Okay, next up we've got Cure the Rising Tide, which is a 3-mana 3/2 legendary merfolk. So it could play this in a merfolk deck for sure. When it enters, draw 2, discard 2. And then Threshold, when it attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you can create a blue Scion, which is an 8/8 Scion of the Deep, 8/8 blue octopus creature token. Okay, it's an octopus. Nice. That's why there's an octopus in the background. Okay, got it. So very cool card. This card is, I think, quite powerful. You could play it as early as turn 2 with Llanowar Elves. So that could be interesting. And then it really, I think the key card is you want to kind of play it in a graveyard deck. The first ability to draw 2 and discard 2 is pretty decent. I mean, you could play this in like a Reanimator deck as a way to enable your reanimation on the following turn. But I was thinking maybe in sort of like a Delirium deck. Imagine if you played Land Rails on turn 1, this on turn 2, turn 3 you just play like Cash Grab to put 5 more cards in the graveyard, for example, 4 more cards in the graveyard. If you wanted to sort of not put something there just to get Threshold, you could do that. By itself, it puts 2. So then you attack, and you on turn 3 you have an 8/8 coming for essentially for free. So that is pretty strong. You could also kind of play in the Helping Hand kind of deck, which is already trying to mill yourself, and then use this to return it back to play for 1 mana. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think this card is quite powerful and definitely will see some play in standard. Just 3 mana to have this looting effect and to have the potential to make an 8/8 octopus and have a 3/2 body on it. I don't know. I think that's really, really strong card. But yeah, let me know what you think about it in the comments. But this is definitely one I'm excited to kind of build around and try out in standard. Okay, next up we've got the Preposterous Proportions, a these giant squirrels are taking over, and this very well could be played in a squirrel deck. Maybe that's what they're um, telling us to do because it is green. So you have it's 7 mana sorcery. Creatures get +10/+10 and gain vigilance until end of turn. Sad that they don't get trample, which is definitely a downside to this card, but it's certainly a cool, interesting card. So gosh, I was thinking about like how to use this. We've got 3 Tree City. So if you were playing, say, squirrels or rabbits or elves or something, a tribal sort of deck, 3 Tree City, which hasn't really seen any play, but I think this card might have a comeback in Foundation Standard because there's a lot of good, again, kinship tribal sort of push, I would say, in Foundations. And you can get a lot of tokens, and this can generate the mana to maybe cast this proportions, and then all your creatures get huge because it's really good in a go wide strategy. You want a lot of creatures in play. Also thought about Collector's Cage would be kind of cute with this if you able to hit it off the Collector's Cage, turn 2 Hideaway. If you played like tokens on, um, so say that you played a 1-drop on turn 1, tokens on turn 2, and then Collector's Cage this, if you got lucky, right? Hide away this, and then tap to put a counter on it, and then all 3 of your creatures get +10/+10, attack for 30, 40, or 35 damage, whatever it is, on turn 3. That would be living the dream there, but maybe it's worth it. We'll see what happens. I may try that in standard, but yeah, that's kind of the uses I was thinking of this card. But let me know what you think about this one. Definitely amazing art. I love it. All right, next up we've got a Soulstone Sanctuary, a new land, a rare land. Taps for colorless, and then 4 mana to make it become a 3/3 with vigilance and all creature types, and it's still land. So definitely an interesting card. It doesn't turn back into well, it doesn't lose its creature type. It is still a land, but it doesn't lose its creature ability when you do this. So it's kind of like Stalking Stones for people who remember that card. Kind of a throwback to that. And you can use the ability, the mana on it, to turn itself into the creature, and then the following turn attack with it with vigilance, and still use the vigilance as a way and to tap it for mana. So definitely an interesting, cool card. I think this is fairly powerful. The most important piece is probably that it has all creature types. Um, for example, in a goblin deck, would probably, if you were like mono red and you had some colorless slots in your mana base, you probably want to play this for sure. In demons as well, Unholy Annex is such a powerful card that's kind of been popping up in different formats. Just having another demon in your mana base is very strong. I would definitely say that would be played. It also has Vigilance, which is interesting with FOMO. I was thinking about trying to build a FOMO deck with a bunch of Vigilance creatures, just so it's like Delirium effect. When you get the additional combat step, you don't have to, it doesn't matter that you only untap 1 creature, all your vigilance creatures get to attack again. So maybe you'd play this in that sort of strategy, so vigilance could matter quite a bit. But yeah, definitely a cool, interesting land. I think this will see some play, especially with, again, they kind of are pushing all these kind of kindred different tribes, goblins and elves and things like that now. And Bloomburrow gave us a bunch of different ones as well. So in all those different strategies, I think this would potentially want to see play. Okay, next up we've got the Quilled Great Worm, which is a 6 mana 7/7 worm with trample. It says during your turn, whenever creature you control deals combat damage, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. You can cast this card from your graveyard by removing 6 counters from among creatures you control, in addition to paying its other costs. So, a kind of a recursive threat if you have enough stuff in play. But the first ability I think is really key to this card being good. I don't know how good this is actually. I mean, 6 mana is a lot for a 7/7 trample, but you can play it right away, and all your creatures are kind of buffed if they do any combat damage, not just damage to your opponent, but any combat damage. So even if your opponent blocks them, they kind of double their power and toughness essentially based on how much damage they did. But this by itself, too, I was thinking, well, it's kind of cool with if you have other creatures that double strike, but if you give this thing itself double strike, for example, with Two-Headed Hunter or with Blacksmith's Talent, that one's kind of cool because it's gives something double strike and haste, right? Uh, if it has double strike, if this itself had double strike, it attacks for 7. So you hit them for 7 with the first strike, then it'll trigger, get 7 more counters on it, and then you hit them for 14. So that's 21 damage, just instant lethal if this thing has double strike. So that's kind of interesting and cool. How can you kind of bring it back? Obviously, like +1/+1 counters are probably the most common counter that you can remove from creatures you have, but they also have 9 Lives Familiar, which comes into play with 8 counters on it by itself, so you can remove some of those to bring this back. There's also like oil counters on creatures too that I was thinking. 9 Lives Familiar, but just by itself is like I think the creature that has like the most counters I could think of. So by itself would be able to bring this back. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think about this card. It's huge. It's kind of cool. It's interesting. I don't know how good it actually is, but yeah, definitely a cool and interesting new design. Okay, next up we've got Celestial Armor, which is a 3 mana artifact equipment with flash. When it enters, attach it to a creature you control. It gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and it gets +2 power and flying, equipped for 4. So this card does a lot of different things. It's kind of interesting. I think this has a chance of seeing some play, maybe just as a sideboard card or a main deck card against if a bunch of removal or like wrath effects are quite strong that don't exile are quite strong in standard. This could be a nice sort of answer to that, either in the sideboard and the main deck for creature decks. But also we do have some again equipment sort of matters cards. Um, I was thinking Jor Kadeen is kind of nice with this because it curves into it. Like you play this on 2 and then armor it up on turn 3. It triggers its ability right away, so you get to draw a card. So maybe that's kind of sweet. You can also search it up as maybe a one of in your deck with Kellen, if that's relevant. But it's kind of fine on its own, just in an aggro deck potentially too. So um, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. They are really trying to always push equipment stuff in standard, and it's never really that good. But you know, hopefully, maybe someday it will be kind of good. And this might be a pretty good piece to the equipment deck, if that ever is a thing. Okay, next up we've got the Drake Hatcher. This is a really cool card. I really like this one. Well designed, I think. It's a 2 mana 1/3 with Vigilance and Prowess, human wizard. And whenever blue creature, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many incubation counters on it. Remove 3 incubation counters from it and create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. So definitely cool in like a prowess deck. You want to pump this up with as much power as you can, and you want it to kind of hit the opponent for as much damage as you can, which is always what prowess decks are wanting to do. I think this is decent and potentially in a prowess deck, um, because if you get like at least 3 damage in with this, then you get 3 counters on it, and then you can remove those counters to get 1 Drake right away. So if you just cast like a Monstrous Rage on this, it would hit for 5, you get 5 counters. If you cast, say, Enter the Enigma, which is kind of nice with this, triggers prowess, make sure it gets in, can't be blocked, you would get 6 counters, and you'd just make 2 Drakes right away. That's pretty decent, I would say, to kind of essentially get two flying drakes for free with this guy, and you definitely had gotten your value right away. One of the problems with like the prowess deck is that you can run out of creatures with it, but this gives you an additional creature that comes with it, kind of, if you do get a hit in with it. So even if they kill this afterwards, then you still have other creatures to kind of cast your pump spells on. So that could be useful. There's also a wizard and a human, which are relevant card types. If you want some jank, it's Doubling Season. I don't know. I just thought about Doubling Season when I looked at this card, because it is a card that uses both counters and creates creature tokens. So playing Doubling Season would also trigger Prowess. If you got in just those two cards, if you got in, you get 2 counters on it, and then that double to 4 counters, and then you could remove 3 to make 2 Drakes. If you did any more damage, it would kind of get out of hand. If you if you had those out and you did like 3 damage to it, you'd get 6 counters, and then you could remove that to create 4 Drakes, which would be kind of sweet. I don't know. Doubling Season is certainly a crazy fun card. It probably wouldn't see play very competitively, but if you want something fun to do, maybe there is some synergy there. All right, next up we've got the Silven Scavenging, which is a 3-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Create a 3/3 green raccoon creature token if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So you get to choose one. You can't do both. But this card seems like it should be in Bloomburrow, because you kind of got the Bloomburrow art, which I probably reused for this card. Definitely an interesting card. There are 4 Power Matters cards. There's another one, the Flamewake Phoenix, which is also this is a reprint, but being reprinted into Standard now with Foundations, which really wants you to have 4 power or greater. Because I think with the Silven Scavenging, just putting a +1/+1 counter on a creature at the end of step is not very powerful for 3 mana. I mean, there's like the Innkeeper's Talent, which does that for 2 mana and does that at the beginning of your combat. So if you're using it for that ability, I don't think you want to use that at all. It is kind of nice as is like a failsafe if you have like a smaller creature out and you pump it up eventually to a 4 power creature. But if you can trigger this right away, they gave us this new Slumbering Cerebus, which is, as far as I can see, is like kind of one of the only 4 power 2 mana creatures that we have in Standard. It says it doesn't untap during its untap step, and at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died, you get to untap it. But it does sort of enable the Silven Scavenger and the Flamewake Phoenix just for 2 mana to come back from the graveyard or to make a green raccoon each turn. So there's a lot of synergy between these cards that can kind of curve into each other, and maybe a green-red Power Matters deck potentially. I don't know. Just my thoughts about how you could maybe use these cards in conjunction with each other. But let me know if you have any other interesting ideas with this one. Okay, next up we've got Raise the Past, which is a really interesting card. 4 mana for sorcery. Return all creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So I think there's a lot of different ways you could potentially use this card. Maybe in a self-mill deck with like Philology Archaeologist, a bunch of other creatures that mill your deck, and so you kind of fill up your graveyard with a bunch of creatures that mill your deck for other creatures that cost 2 or less, and then you cast the Raise the Past just to bring them all back, and you kind of just have a bunch of different dorks out, all for 4 mana. Maybe. Could be kind of cool with like Cunning Coyote, or like just filling your deck with haste creatures. Maybe just like in a red white sort of aggro deck. This is sort of the top end. You play all your creatures out that are cost 1 or 2 that have haste, and you kind of get in. Maybe you trade them off. They die to removal, and then you cast this, bring them all back, and attack, something like that. Also interesting with maybe like a sacrifice outlet like Bart, which costs 2, could bring back, sacrifice all your creatures and then raise them back, raise the past back into play right away. So there's could be some potential there. Maybe kind of all 3 in the same deck. I don't really know. But yeah, definitely an interesting, cool card. Let me know what you think about this one. Feels like it has like combo potential written all over it. There's probably in older formats other cards that work really well with this, that kind of you can kind of combo win with just paying this. But yeah, definitely a cool card to keep an eye on. I'll be kind of brewing around this, I think, for sure, coming up. So that is Raise the Past. Next up, we've got a new Zimone, the Paradox Sculptor, which is a 4 mana Blue, green, 1/4, legendary human wizard is a mythic, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. So you can target itself and another creature that you have. And then this interesting effect, which is 2 mana tap and double the number of each kind of counters on up to 2 target creatures and/or artifacts you control. So, I mean, the obvious thing to do with this is that you can use this to pump your creatures and then double the +1/+1 counters that you're putting on your creatures. Or if they have +1/+1 counters on it, you can double those, which is, kind of sweet. Maybe slamming its humanity. I didn't put that on the slide, but that's certainly something you could do with this if you want some fun jank with that. Um, but on its own, without that ability, I think it's decent. It is, itself kind of putting a counter on itself, so it's kind of like a 2/5 on its own, and then pumping something else every turn. You kind of get to do this, so that's a powerful effect on its own. But I was trying to think about what I don't know if we've ever gotten this ability where you can double counters on artifacts specifically. And creatures, I think that is a thing that other cards do, like double the number of +1/+1 counters on it. But like if you double the amount of counters on, say, Urbrask's Forge, that would be kind of interesting, right? You can kind of double the oil counters there, or the Millennium Calendar, which you really want to double the counters there to win the game, get up to 1,000 counters, make your opponent lose 1,000 life. So maybe there's some interesting combo potential there. You could probably, I don't know how quickly you could kind of get to 1,000 counters with this, but maybe there's some mathematicians in the comments that want to tell me how quickly you could win with that. But maybe the Filigree Silex as well, double the number of oral counters on that, and then get to 10 and do 10 damage to your opponent with that. So I don't know. This is a really interesting card, and it's certainly a unique effect. Maybe there are some creatures in standard that you would want to really double the counters on. Kind of works with the other Zimone that makes, I think are they fractal counters, creatures, double those, but just kind of played Zimone tribal deck. But yeah, definitely a cool card. Looking forward to brewing with it and seeing maybe there's some other kind of interesting, cool combos with it that I'm missing. All right, next up we got some really sweet new reprints. We got Krenko the Mob Boss, which is a 4-mana 3/3 legend goblin warrior. Tap to create X 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, where X is the number of goblins you control. So obviously you kind of want to play this in goblin decks. We have the Horde Master here, which gives all your goblins +1/+1, and then when I die, you kind of look at the top card, and if it's a goblin, you can cast it until the end of your next turn. So definitely could go nicely in a goblin themed deck, but I think maybe it's even better with like Agatha's Soul Cauldron, because this ability by itself is quite strong and kind of can get out of hand pretty quickly. I mean, maybe you play already this in a goblin deck just because you have Krenko. It's also sweet with new Marvin as well, because if you have Marvin out and you play this on, say, Marvin on 2, this on 4, you can tap the Marvin right away because it won't have Summoning Sickness, and use it to create a goblin token. If you have more goblins in play, then you can just start using it right away. But once you start kind of using this ability a couple times, it just starts to snowball because the other goblins see each other from the past time you used it, and it just creates a huge uh, board of goblins. So definitely an interesting and cool card to have in standard, and definitely have a high ceiling for sure. So we'll see what happens with Krenko, but those are my ideas. Okay, next up we've got a whole bunch of reprints. These are all kind of from the starter kit, I believe, or not the starter kit. I can't remember what it's called exactly, but the collection box, something like that. Um, some interesting, cool ones. So we got Fierce Empath, which can sort of search up a creature with about mana value 6 or greater, which is an elf. Again, more support for elves, but also maybe this is a nice tutor for some big creature that you want to use in your combo. So I'm kind of thinking about all these cards from kind of a combo lens typically, and like how you can build combos. Anything with tutors are quite good. So the Wishclaw Talisman is a pretty decent tutor. The Vile Entomber is really interesting to be able to tutor something directly into your graveyard and have a 2/2 Death Toucher. for 4. That's quite useful for like reanimation strategies, things like that. Definitely a card to keep an eye on. Immerstrom Predator is that card was recently in standard, but Kaldheim, right? Yeah, okay. So a few years ago, but it is sort of an unconditional sacrifice outlet, so we're getting another one of those. It costs 4, and it's not the cheapest sacrifice outlet, but it is an unconditional one to sort of sacrifice all your creatures if you want to. So something to keep in mind. Impact Tremors, definitely a combo card for sure with token decks, or if you have a combo that infinitely returns a creature from the graveyard back to play, that can be your win condition with that. Boros Charm is just, really good. Efficient burn, so maybe this is like a burn deck that you want to build, and Boros Charm would certainly go in that. Ailey, the Eternal Pilgrim, is a really interesting one. I don't think I've really seen this card, remember this card very well, which is a 2-mana 2/3 with Death Touch, and the ability to sacrifice another creature to gain life equal to its toughness. That's a lot of life you could gain, and there are sort of some benefits of gaining tons of life all at once. And there are some creatures with a lot of toughness, like that turtle. Can't remember what it's called, but it has like 15 toughness. So you could like gain 15 life if you sacrifice that. So maybe there's some interesting combo potential there. We got the 1,000-Year Storm, which is kind of a crazy card. I don't know if that'll be that great, but it is 6 mana to kind of give all your instant sorceries Storm for other instants and sorceries you've already cast. Maybe that could be a finisher in a combo deck. Brass's Bounty creates tons of treasure tokens. Maybe there's a way to kind of cheat that into play, or kind of if you copy it, for example, with 1,000-Year Storm, then you can kind of create tons of treasure tokens. The Marauding Blight Priest I put here just because it is another one of these effects that when you gain life, your opponent loses life, and then there's that 5-mana guy that's when your opponent loses life, you gain that much life. Sorry, that's what this does. It does the opposite of that. So that could combos with it. It creates an infinite combo with it. There's another kind of redundant piece for that combo. You don't necessarily need more pieces for that, but that could be useful. The Swift Blade Vindicator is a 2-mana 1/1 double strike, vigilance, and trample. That could be used. There's so many pump spells and standard monstrous rage, style decks that maybe this would want to see play in it. It does kind of have built-in trample, which is useful when you're kind of pumping this. So something to keep in your mind when you're building kind of all-in pump style effects. And Seize the Spoils. This card used to be one of my favorite cards when it was legal and standard. Definitely sets up a lot. Does a lot. It sets up your graveyard if you need a discard outlet. It draws you cards, can be useful, and ramps you as well. Fixes your mana, or just make sure you hit your 4th mana if you need to. So this could kind of be decent, maybe a Reanimator deck, or other decks that use the graveyard, or just in a ramp strategy. So I think this card has a lot of uses and something kind of like a key role player in some combo decks as well. So definitely a lot of cool, sweet reprints going on here. Let's keep going with ones that I'm even more excited about, which is Galta, which, 7 mana, 12 mana for a 12/12. Elder Dinosaur, Legend, and it costs X less to cast. X is the total power creatures you control, trample. So this is really interesting and cool because we actually have a lot of dinosaur synergies already, like the Pugnacious Hammer Skull, the Belligerent Yearling, which is quite interesting with this. Because if you played Galta, it would give the Yearling 12 power with trample right away, so that could attack for 12. So that could be a nice curve to go Yearling into Hammer Skull into Galta, and then swing with everything. And then the Lore Keeper as well can tap to add extra mana for dinosaurs. So there's a lot of sort of dinosaur payoffs that haven't seen a ton of play in standard, but could make a comeback. We also got the Ancient one, just to make this a lot cheaper if that is sort of part of a combo piece. I don't know, just some ideas with this, but Galta is certainly an exciting new dinosaur. Okay, next up we got Genesis Wave. This is a reprint. If you don't know what this one was, this one did see some play back in the day. In I believe it was elves decks, like elf ball decks, things like that. So it is 3 green with X, and it says reveal the top X cards of your library. You can put any number of permanent cards with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put into your graveyard. So this puts lands into play, but so they have to be permanents. Um, so it can kind of spiral out of control. If you have a ton of mana, you can pump into this. We are getting Elvish Archdruid, which can generate a ton of mana. So maybe there's something like that. We also have the 3 Tree City, which I mentioned earlier, which can generate a ton of mana. And maybe you can just kind of elf ball it up with with this card back in the day and make a ton of elves, and maybe there's sort of a haste enabler to win right away with this, or just to flood the battlefield and hope to not get swept away. But I don't know. This is an interesting card. I'm not sure if it's good enough anymore, but there's definitely potential, especially in elves, to make a ton of mana. So I think it's got a shot. Okay, and last up, we've got the Swiftfoot boots, which are not the most exciting, kind of an interesting equipment. This is a reprint. 2 mana for an equipment. Equip creature is hexproof and haste, and 1 to equip. But it is, for me, quite exciting because of the printing of Herald of Eternal Dawn, which says you can't lose the game, opponents can't win the game. So for some decks, if you had this equipped on it, you just instantly win. If they didn't have any, they need specifically a sweeper or a way to make you sacrifice this, but not every deck would have that. So this could be a combo that just wins you the game instantly, which would be pretty sweet. And you could, I was thinking, even set it up with one last job to return both of them from your graveyard to play already equipped to it for 6 mana. So definitely an interesting potential with the Swiftfoot boots as well. So those are the combos. Those are the new cards that we got in the last few days. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Really appreciate you watching. If you watch the end of the video, yeah, give it a like, thumbs up. Let me know what you think about. What are you most excited to build going forward? Any cool combos that I missed? Yeah, love to hear about it. Really appreciate all the support for the channel. It takes me a while to put together these spoiler videos, and then I'm going to have gameplay videos coming up soon with all these crazy, wacky combos in standard, mostly, maybe some older formats on Arena. We'll see what kind of brews I come up with, but yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.